You know, I decided to stop pretending that this wouldn't happen. It wasn't healthy. As always, we begin with a cutscene, and welcome to Valis 3, the third entry in Telenet Japan's Valis series of action platformers. The one with a rather dodgy translation at times. Anyway, I decided to take on the Sega Genesis version because the Turbo CD version annoys me for reasons other than its atrocious voice acting. You see, the Genesis version actually has 2.5 less levels than the Turbo CD version, and they are levels that I do not miss. I also appreciate the faster text scroll in this one over the later localization of Valis 1 for the Genesis, because this was the first Valis game localized for the US, and apparently claims is a bit smarter than his predecessor, because the first thing he thinks about before going out and doing any eviling is whether or not Yuko would get involved. There is a bit in this intro that's missing that was in the Turbo version, such as why the swords were made, which was to fight against the power of the gods. And they worked. This is not a low power setting. And I guess they only have capital letters for names in Vacanti. One of the things I'll always appreciate about Rogueless, though, is that he came up with the idea of summoning a Japanese schoolgirl to be his magical warrior before the good guys did. By the way, this is the only time that it was mentioned that Rogueless was ever controlling Reiko through brainwaves or whatever. But I guess at Renovation Products, the right hand knoweth not in general. More like a few months at the outside. Yuko started her adventures at 17 and is still in high school by the time Valis 2 rolls around. This is also where we establish the Turbo CD version of Valis 2 as the canon one. Had already taken. Interesting word choice. That's the first time I've seen that as a euphemism for horrible death. But yep, there she is in her Valis 2 Turbo equipment. You know, the cosmetic-only upgrade. There's no way she could escape endless battle and bloodshed. Whoops. In any case, I decided to kick off my next round of playing with Valis 3, because I kind of feel obligated to at least see out the Valis games where Yuko was the main character. I'd like to do Valis 4 Turbo, however there's no translation guide to it, so I wouldn't be able to tell you half of what was being said. Cheer up, shell-shocked magical warrior person. to forgive that passage because it's more or less true. And I think the time scale is just a little bit off here. She'd better tell him it has a sequel in mind. Oh, I assure you, there are things capable of stopping her. I kind of built this run around the fact that I pretty well expected to die at a few points. And anyway, our 3 selectable characters. So, welcome one and all to Where I Play Valis 3. So, this is Chem, and the first time we ever get an actual playable ally. There are multiple selectable characters in this game. And this one... Oh, she's just stolen our sword. Wait, Come back with my sword, you she-goblin! So, Yuko really has all the same moves from Valis 1. High jump, and I tried to slide back there, but the slide is magic and thus requires a magic sword to do. One of the problems I have with the in-level text boxes is that there's no general indication of who's talking, so you sometimes have to just discern it by context. And we know that this is a cutscene, because there's no way Cham could ever lose to this jerk in an actual fight in-game. By the way, it kind of amuses me that we actually start with less equipment than we did in Valis 2 for the shark. So, going to grab the sword when going down a fire escape might have been safer? You know, being able to fly would turn out to be very useful at many points in this game. So, we have somewhat more normal sub-weapons in this game, more Castlevania-like. However, our attacks are generally governed by that power bar the same way they are in an NES game called Astyanax for the 6 or 7 of you who have actually played that one. Unlike Secret of Mana, lower charge shots are not useless. However, the point at the charge bar where you shoot off does affect certain properties. Like in the case of Yuko's sword attacks, it affects the range. Yuko also shares her weird hitboxes from Valis 1, meaning that her crouching box is actually taller when she's attacking. Getting one up. Other than that, she really controls the same. And here's the first boss, who is a jerk and a loser. So, Hammerguard is really nothing special at all, and is probably the easiest first boss of any Valis game. Easier than Zalaga, easier than Gyalfa from Valis 1. Just a bit of the old razzle-dazzle, and he's down. Yeah, we're still in the time when Osamu Nabeshima took over the character design duties, so once again we are without the ridiculous bug eyes that occupied earlier Valis games. By the way, Valis 3 was the first game in the series to move completely to console. It didn't have any releases on personal computers unlike previous entries in the series. You know, as much as I don't like the voice acting of the Turbo CD version, I'm just gonna throw up the intro, you know, a link or something just for giggles. Just so y'all can experience what I've been talking about all this time. The voice acting was actually handled by the people who did the voice acting for Last Alert, if you ever watched a playthrough of that. So, the plan to save the Dark World people is to destroy all of the others. See you next time.